Thank you, everybody. I'll try to be very quick. Um, Basically, I just want to show, okay, it's quite known that the discovery of the Pro Archia by Petrarch was fundamental to the birth of the Renaissance humanism, and so to the term itself, humanism. And of course, because of the presence of the concept of humanitas um, in the oration. But what I want to show very quickly is that um, the way the humanists probably conceived humanitas is very much indebted to the notion as it emerges from the Pro Archia. So it's not just the word, but it's just the way in which it emerges and in which it was conceived of by the humanists. I just hope you can you all hear me well? Yeah. Okay. Um, well, because for example, we have here Haldeman monograph from 2016, in which he said one of the most important of Cicero's own discoveries the humanities understood was where the humanities understood as the distinctive arts of mankind, and that's a great monograph in which little attention, if any, is paid to the Pro Archia. And this is what I want to just add the importance of the Pro Archia. And not just because of the expression humanitas, but in particular because of the expression studia humanitatis, which we can read at Pro Archia 3. And because, of course, the notion and the noun humanitas was already quite used during the first half of the first century AC, while the notion of studia humanitatis appears a bit later and used by only by Cicero actually, and then once by Pliny the Younger, and then by Gallius, by Aulus Gallius. But yet, this notion, the notion and the phrase "studia humanitatis" became earned greater success later on in the Renaissance. And we all know that Petrarch played a fundamental role in discovering the oration, but yet he never used the expression studia humanitatis itself. As far as we know, thanks to some studies by Cole and also by Michael Reeve, we know that the third, at least for the time being, what we know is that the term was first employed in the West by Coluccio Salutati in a letter written on the 30th of September 1369 to Ugolino Orsini. And at some point, we read in the final line, we read that the father, Ugolino Orsini's father, after long practice, came to grasp all the studia humanitatis and provided for every aspect of life for myself and for the others, as the son says in his letter. And then, after Salutati's first use, it almost took 1 century before the expression really became widespread, and it was used alongside the Studia Humaniora. And I think it's also important to stress that there is a tight connection between the notion of humanitas and the use of comparatives and superlatives of humanus to convey that notion. So, for example, the adjective humanus itself very rarely convey if very rarely conveys the idea of humanitas. And so at some point, the humanists use both the phrases studio humanitatis and studio humaniora to call their educational program. And the interesting thing is that this educational program was based on pretty much the same subjects we also find in Cicero's oeuvre. So, for example, study of grammar, rhetoric, poetry, history, and moral philosophy. Um, what was the original meaning of humanitas? So, why is it important to stress this? Because we are also looking for the true meaning of humanitas. So we need to go back again to antiquity, and in the 2nd century to Aulus Gellius, perhaps that in the Attic Nights he devoted an entire chapter to the notion of humanitas. The chapter is this one, 1317, in which Gallius basically criticizes those who, according to him, misused the term humanitas and understood humanitas as philanthropia, while he said the true, the exact meaning should have been paideia. The most important thing is not so much that Jalli was right or wrong. The thing is that the two main concepts at stake are paideia on the one hand, so education and training in the liberal arts, and philanthropia on the other, so kind attitude, benevolence towards all human beings, qua human beings. The thing is, was Gallius right? No, he wasn't. If we also, and this is why also the Pro Archia is very important, because it makes clear that right from the beginning, humanitas was understood as a mixture of both the notions of paideia and philanthropia. Because if in the beginning it's clear that Cicero in Pro Archia 3 uses it as it meant actually paideia, and it's also clear that there is a premise which indicates that this meaning, no, when it says on paragraph 2, omnes artes quia humanitate pertinet habent quodam commune vinculum, so is talking about some artes, which are these arts is not clear from the Pro Archia, but it's made clear, for example, in the De Oratore. The arts on which a noble and gentleman education is based on mathematics, music, study of literature and poetry, or the doctrines on the nature of the universe, human behavior, and the affairs of state. So this is very interesting for the comparison between the notion of humanitas and in antiquity and during the Renaissance, because if we look, for example, of the cultural program, the educational programs, better of the humanists. So I take here as an example the one by Tommaso Prantucelli, the future Pope Nicholas IV, in a letter to Cosimo de' Medici, which dates to 1438. We see that there is a strict connection between tight connections or between the two notions of humanitas. So on the one hand, in Cicero's De Oratore, the artes are the ones we've already read, but in Tommaso Prantucelli's program, he speaks of history, grammar, rhetoric, poetics, and when he says moralis, that aspect, of course, covers all mores in Cicero's, and so the notion of philanthropia, of course. And it's clear at the end of the Pro Archia that when Cicero then appealed to the judges once again, on this occasion, he understands humanitas as something different. So it looks as if there's been a sort of educational path throughout the course of the entire Pro Archia, so which has led from paideia to philanthropia. So this is the most important thing, because when Cicero says that that the accused should be relieved by your means the judges, humanity, rather than underwhelmed by their severity, it's clear that he is understanding humanitas in quite different terms. So the thing is that it's quite clear that the Pro Archia shows a perfect educational path. So at the beginning, humanitas is understood as paideia, so education, but thanks to this educational path, then humanitas becomes also philanthropia, and this is, of course, the most important thing according to Cicero, which is that if education does not lead to moral improvement, is by itself insufficient. So this is why, according to Cicero, philanthropia and humanitas are, and paideia are really two sides of the same coins, and they need to be present all together. And so we can, as far as we know, the humanists also understand humanitas as a mixture of both paideia and philanthropia, because of the educational programs we can see in some humanists, and I think it's quite clear and quite obvious that the Pro Archia played a central role in the humanists' correct understanding of the notion of humanitas, the Ciceronian notion of humanitas, which otherwise was at times misunderstood during other periods before the Renaissance. Thank you very much.